Hey, my name's Nick. I made over 100 grand last month with no-code tools like Make and now N8N. Both these platforms have gotten super popular recently, so in this video I wanted to basically give you guys a comprehensive breakdown of each from somebody that actually uses them, but also not just from a nerdy academic perspective, but in terms of real business utility, like these platforms' ability to drive dollars. I'm also going to cover the differences between them. I'm going to talk about what the building process looks like on N8N versus Make.com. I'm actually going to create the same system on both platforms so you can see the difference play by play. I'll show you the relative cost of each platform. I'll give you guys a financial breakdown. And finally, we're going to round it out with which one I would personally choose moving into the new year, especially if I were completely new to this, and doubly especially if I wanted to make real money selling services on them. So if you guys are looking to use no code in your business or maybe start an agency, doing automation or something of that nature, then this is the video for you. Let's get into it. Okay, buckle up because we got a lot to cover. As I mentioned, we're going to start by breaking each platform down. First will be N8N, where we're going to chat about the context, kind of some background information, what N8N was made for, the name of N8N, which most people don't know. I'll chat about some concepts that are fundamental to N8N but don't apply to other no-code platforms, stuff like their Canvas workflows, nodes, and some of their looping logic. Then finally, we're going to chat about AI agents, which is one of the big reasons why N8N has gained a lot of prominence recently. Finally, after that, we're going to do a hands-on UX review, which is where I actually go into the dashboard, play around with the tool, just walk you through everything from a bird's eye view. After, we're going to do the exact same thing with Make.com, context, concepts, a hands-on UX review, and then we're going to get to everybody's favorite part, which is the actual building, where I am going to build the exact same system in both Make and N8N. I'm going to contrast the approaches therein. You're going to learn a lot about the different sorts of logic required, like the skill levels, programming knowledge, and so on and so forth. After that, we'll cover some major differences in UX and functionality. I'll kind of go line by line and talk about my own experience as somebody with many, many years doing no code before doing a financial comparison. And then I will give you guys the secret sauce at the very end and tell you what I would choose. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's dive right into it. So the very first thing we're going to do is break down each platform. I'm going to be taking more of an economic perspective when I do these breakdowns. The reason why is because I just noticed a lot of people on YouTube are talented with these platforms, but they'll put together systems that wouldn't actually work in practice, I find, if you wanted to sell them to a client or if you wanted to use them in a business. There's a lot of talk about AI agents right now, for instance. And I think superficially, a lot of the functionalities can be really cool. But, I ask people, well, okay, how much money does this actually make? And a lot of the time they kind of come up with jack shit for an answer. So I'm going to show you guys some practical ways that you guys can make money with both of these platforms, N8N and Make.com. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to, I'm going to be talking about some more in-depth reasons why to use one versus the other. So obviously, let's get started with N8N. I'm going to give you guys some background context. First things first, I just took a screenshot of their page just a few minutes ago. This is what it looks like. As you guys can see, they're very much positioning themselves as AI native workflows. That's in contrast to, Zapier, Make.com, and a couple of other platforms that, while talking about AI, I don't really think make it the whole pitch. But these guys have a lot behind them now, right? They work with Pearson, Adobe works, Sendinblue uses N8N, World Central Kitchen. I don't know what that is, but if a logo's got a globe on it, odds are it's pretty big. So let's start by talking about some context, and then let's run through the rest of it in turn. Now, really interesting, fun trivia fact of the day that nobody's ever going to give a shit if you understand. N8N was actually initially called Nodemation, and is very much the new kid on the block. So Nodemation to N8N, no idea, but apparently that was not a logical stretch for some, and so now we call it N8N. N8N includes a number of features that most other no-code tools do not. The most important one, and the one that gets a lot of buzz, is this concept of self-hosting, which is the ability to host N8N on your own server instead of pay a platform every time you send or receive data using it. So this is in contrast to Make.com. It's in contrast to Zapier. It's in contrast to basically every other platform out there. And it's very, very rare in the no-code space, which naturally resonates with people that are a little bit more developer-oriented. If the main crux of the difference is I can set up a self-hosted server with it, and if that's one of the reasons why we're going to use it, obviously that sort of rationale is going to appeal more to the developers amongst us, right? Now, nothing comes for free. If you want to self-host, it is going to take some more technical knowledge to set up. I'm planning on making videos on that and a bunch of other N8N AI agent stuff in the future. So if that's something you guys are considering, then definitely stay tuned for that. But just know that nothing comes for free. If you make something that's just a lot better, a lot of the time, it's going to require you a little bit more work. Now, another big part of N8N is that they're open source. So bird's eye view, that just means unlike the majority of other no-code tools out there, you can actually look at the code of N8N, which is pretty whack. If I click on this button here, I open this up and just, scroll through. This is a GitHub repo, GitHub being a place where you could just store up scripts and code and share them with people. But this is the whole GitHub repo for N8N. So literally all the code for the whole thing is here. They are not secretive with, how they put this thing together. Make does not have this. Zapier and other no-code platforms do not have this. Or if they do, it's usually some limited subset of the code that, they don't necessarily reveal to everybody. So, what that means is in practice, if you guys were looking to take N8N and then let's say you make a business with it or some API or something, you could theoretically hire up some developers and have them actually tweak the source code of N8N itself to make it work better. If you run into some major some major block or something, you can actually solve it with code. Now, as I mentioned, this is a double-edged sword because more freedom means more responsibility. Thank you, Uncle Ben. I don't think that was his quote, but, nothing comes for free. But the really cool part about N8N and, kind of this point that I'm going to keep on harping over the course of the next hour or so is you don't actually have to self-host it. I don't self-host it. A lot of people don't self-host it. The big technical block for most people in getting started with N8N is the self-hosting thing, but you absolutely don't have to. The pricing actually ends up being pretty comparable to most other no-code platforms if you don't. So, self-hosting is really cool, and it unlocks a whole new side of the no-code platform, but they also totally have a cloud-hosted offering that you can pay for, and that's fine too. So this is definitely best of both worlds. You could tell that it's the new kid on the block because they're just offering a lot of these next generation functions, which is neat. And then, they definitely lean heavily on the dev-friendly side of the no-code spectrum. They have a pretty straightforward interface. It's not really as polished, I would say, as most other ones, nor is it as intuitive. But once you get used to it, it can obviously be very powerful. Okay, we're 1/3 of the way done the text before we jump into building. The second thing I wanted to chat about are some concepts. Now, what I have in front of us is I have an actual snippet of an N8N canvas. A canvas is just the visual surface upon which you drag and drop modules. And as you see here, we have this thing on the left which says execute workflow trigger. It goes into this code module. We do some fun filtering magic, aggregating, and then we add a label to what looks like a Gmail. What's going on here? I have no idea. We're going to have to jump into the actual UX of the platform and be able to click on any of these puppies. But essentially, this just is an illustrative tool to show us what each of these three major concepts in N8N are. The background here is just the canvas. It's this little thing with a bunch of dots. The workflow is just corresponds to this whole thing. And then the nodes are just the individual things here. So execute workflow trigger, that's a node. Code, that's a node. I bring this up because each of these have different definitions and concepts between no-code platforms. So it's just good to sort of understand, their differences before we actually dive in. Because I'm going to be throwing a lot of terminology at you. And, anytime you're in more of a programmery sort of thing, automation definitely being one of them, definitions can be super important. So yeah, that's that. In terms of inputs and outputs, N8N is kind of unique in how it structures the view. The inputs are just always on the left. Outputs are just always on the right. So pretty straightforward. Your work is here in the middle, which is just transforming the inputs to outputs in some way. So the input is the thing that feeds into the node. If I were to scroll back up here, for the purposes of posterity, this is the input here, and then this is the output to this. So this, text classifier, that module in particular is not here, but I don't know, replace the term text classifier with code. And this is basically just a bird's eye view of this. These are the inputs and the outputs. Credentials are, reasonably simple to understand. They use these credentials to sign into all of these different platforms. No-code tools are just Glue, right? Glue is fantastic, but it doesn't really do anything unless you connect stuff to it or stick it on stuff, right? So just like Glue, no-code platforms need other platforms to connect to. And credentials are a very hot topic in no-code tools because some of them handle credentials really easily, some of them handle credentials really shittily. I'm happy to say that N8N handles credentials reasonably well. It's not the best. I personally think Make handles them better, which I'll show you in a moment. But you can connect with a variety of methods. OAuth 2 just means you'll get a little sign in with the platform button. So, if you want to set up a cool flow, which is with a Google Drive folder, Google Sheet, or Google Gmail or something, a lot of the time you can just click sign in and a little sign in window will pop up. It'll connect to your account and then voila, you're done. That's in contrast a lot of the time to doing stuff like API keys, handling client IDs, client secrets and stuff like that, which is really annoying. Okay, and then finally we have this concept of executions. And execution just means a run of a workflow, basically. If I just scroll back up here, right? This whole thing, if I just click go and this runs through from left to right, that'd be considered one execution. And this seems pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but I bring that up because this is very different to how Make.com works, which you'll find out in a few minutes. Make.com does not bill you based off of executions in this manner. It bills you based off something called operations. So that's very important to know. And now that I'm glad that we do, we can move on to the next step, which is AI agents. So one of the biggest and most decisive reasons why N8N has blown up as much as it has is because of AI agents. You may be here because my YouTube title had the term AI agent in it. Or maybe you are just more interested in the AI agent side of things than you are the procedural automation side of things. And that's totally cool. AI agents are definitely very powerful. Essentially, N8N has decided very intelligently to put a module in their platform called the AI agent. It's literally just like a module. You can go on the right hand side, you click AI agent. I want to add an AI agent to my flow. And whether this is because of foresight or something else, this has really helped them grow. And it's become a core feature of what most N8N flows that are do cool things involved. So to keep things really simple, basically, when you talk to ChatGPT or something, it's just a text interface, right? You send a text and then it returns you some text. What AI agents are, or at least the way that N8N defines them, is instead of just sending you back text and that just being the interface, you can actually connect an AI model like ChatGPT or something to a tool, and you can choose or create one of those tools. And then when your AI model receives a request or receives some data, instead of just sending you back some text, it can actually go and it can execute something using that tool. Maybe there's some weather API or something. It can actually go and it can call the weather API, receive that data, and then use some little decision-making logic to wrap that in a nice present and send it back to you. Instead of it just being -17, it'll say, hey, it's -17, make sure to wear a coat or something. I don't know, maybe you want to figure out what Peter said to Sally 3 weeks ago in the group chat, right? You send that to your ChatGPT model, and ChatGPT thinks, how am I going to find this out? Well, I should probably use the, read group chat flow. And then it goes through and it actually executes a flow that reads through your whole group chat, calls your little group chat API or whatever, returns that data, and then answers your question that way. You can obviously do a ton of other stuff. You could create content. You could, compose frickin' songs. There's a million and one things you can do with AI agents. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later. But just to keep a long story short, AI agents are one of the big components that N8N has over basically all other no-code platforms. It's one of the reasons why it's doing so well. So you're no longer just prompting ChatGPT statically. You're now installed an AI agent module as a decision maker in your business. And the way that I see it is most of these flows are very much in their early stages, but there's a lot of market enthusiasm behind AI agents. So N8N going full AI native with this feature is probably one of the key reasons why they've grown so much and why they're going to continue to grow over the coming months and years. Okay, so that's that for theory. Let's actually jump into some hands-on UX. Let's actually play around with N8N's dashboard. And yeah, let's just learn by doing, which I believe is a much more effective way than us just reading through a slideshow. So I just jumped onto N8N. I am here at nixarif.app.n8n.cloud. This is because I am running this through their cloud offering. As I mentioned, I'm not self-hosting N8N. I have a self-hosted instance, but I don't really play around with it too much. And essentially, let me just run you through what the user interface of N8N looks like, cover some common questions kind of before you have them. And then we can actually jump into a workflow and just play around with it a little bit and, add some modules and that sort of thing. So bird's eye view, we obviously have the logo in the top left-hand corner, nothing special there. We have the home. The home is just a list of all of your workflows. You can sort them based off last updated, last created, name. You can filter them based off of whether or not they have tags. You can obviously organize them however you'd like. Statuses, owners if you have multiple people in your organization. You have an area to store credentials in your home as well. So if you have any connections to various services that you use to send or receive data, in my case, I have a Gmail account here, ClickUp account, Cal.com account, IMAP account. This is where you'll store them, and you can click this button to add more if you want. I'll run you through what all that stuff looks like when we do our practical example. And on the left-hand side, this dashboard is also broken down into projects. And so projects are, in my opinion, kind of a crappy way for N8N to organize different workflows. I have one here that's called personal. This is the default one that I believe N8N sets up for everybody when you make an account. And there are a variety of different ways you can organize things. As you can see, I've sort of loosely organized mine. I tried organizing mine based off of just a specific flow. This is for a YouTube comment scraper that I put together a while ago. I also tried making a templates folder, but essentially this just allows you to, better organize the workflows in your team. workflows in your N8N account. And then you can also assign people to work on different projects. So you can actually add users that could work on this project, but not this one, for instance, which just provides you an additional level of segregation. Most no-code platforms have this, so I'm not going to harp on it. But yeah, that's more or less the way that that's set up. One thing that I should mention is that credentials are not natively or by default stored across projects, which is kind of annoying. So like if you just wanted to use this as like a top level way to organize, this isn't like a folder. Like you can't just drag this in here and then everything's okay. You actually do need to go and you need to like specifically share credentials between projects, because I guess the idea is, you might want different people to use different projects in your team, for security and safety. Click this button to add more. And then down here we have a bunch of commonly misunderstood pages. I'm just going to click on admin panel really quickly to walk you guys through what that looks like. Essentially, when you're running their cloud offer, they take you to a little dashboard here, which shows you the number of executions you have, the number of active workflows you have. And then you can also manage like your billing information and that sort of stuff, which is pretty neat. So as you see, I'm on the Pro monthly plan, my time zone. There's some features surrounding what executions to save. You can click this button to restart your workspace. That actually sends a request to the server to turn it off. And then there's some billing information here, which I'm just not going to get into for privacy purposes. It'll show my card and so on and so forth. They also push their forums really hard, and that's just because they actually do have a fantastic community. It's probably one of the most active communities out there on any no-code platform. I think the N8N community is a lot more active than the Make community, which we can check out later as well. But yeah, that's more or less this from a bird's eye perspective. If we just go back here, you'll see that there are a few other pages. There's templates. Now, N8N organizes this templates page really well. Essentially, they allow this open marketplace where people can create their own flows and then just put them up for you to download in like a second. And so they also have a really cool Canvas feature inside here where you can actually like play around with the scenario just live on their website, which is sweet. And then they document them all really, really well. So a lot of potential here just to get up and running with like, the bare bones, I want to say skeleton of a flow. Instead of you necessarily always having to like build everything from scratch, you can just find something that's like 80% of the way to what you were planning on doing, and then just massage it a little bit. It's also obviously a great learning tool. I really like the templates feature. After that, you have a variables page. Variables is just sort of like a way to store account accessible information. I don't know, I could like go account owner name, and then I could say Nick or something like that. The benefit there is anytime I create a scenario, not a scenario rather, but anytime I create a workflow, I can use this variable now to reference this value. So this is what I would use in the kind of pseudo code that they use. And I'll walk you guys through that when we actually build out a flow. We then have a list of executions here, which is kind of neat. This is just a list of basically every run that has occurred in your N8N instance. I'm using cloud, so in my case, this would be on their server, but if you're using your own, it'd be on your own server. Then you have a little help section here, a list of updates over here on the left-hand side. They're very consistent with their updates. And then, they're also very, I want to say, helpful when you describe bugs and stuff. They kind of like template out all the error messages and everything like that. Because in my opinion, N8N is probably one of the better active developer communities, just given that it's open source and stuff. All right, great. So we just nerded out over a little dashboard. What does this actually mean for us? Well, I'm actually just going to dive right into the canvas, and we can poke around with some system that I built before. So this is a simple email autoresponder. I just said email autoresponder on the left-hand side. RB just stands for rebuild. If you guys are new to this channel, I have created a very long like make.com course a while ago that taught everybody how to get up and running with simple business utility scenarios, as they're called in Make. Like very simple 2 or 3 module flows that like can actually drive revenue and make your business better. And what I'm doing now is I'm just rebuilding them all in N8N just to prepare myself for a course that I'm going to be creating on this platform. But essentially, this email autoresponder functions really similarly and very simply. It starts with a Gmail trigger. Gmail trigger just means this is, if we double click on this, something that watches my Gmail every 15 minutes. So credential to connect with. I connect it to my Gmail account, but I can also click create new credential. Then it'll ask me to sign in with my Google account, which is kind of neat. Just going to close this. Then there are a bunch of variables here that I could set. I could set mode. How quickly do we want it to check my Gmail? So every X, and then X is 15. I could have also just picked 15. I could have picked every minute, every hour, every day. I could have done every week, every month. So you guys see, N8N provides you a ton of, flexibility, and a lot of their built-in nodes are fantastic. You can select a variety of events. In this case, I guess it's just message receive for this module. You have the ability to kind of make some changes. We could simplify the output, and then we could also add some filters. So in my case, I just added a filter for emails that I was receiving with the subject new lead. Now, the really cool part about N8N is it allows you to fetch test events and just handle testing really easily, which I'm going to cover in a lot more detail later. But essentially, if I just click this button, if this is the input of my flow, I click a button, then what I receive here in my little query is this goes through my Gmail account and actually finds an email that fits this filter, subject new lead. And you can see it returns me a ton of fields here, right? This is in JSON, JavaScript object notation, but there are a variety of other forms. Let's just use schema. That's probably the simplest for us. And you can see that it gives me a ton of data. It goes and it fetches an email that contains this, and one of them is here. Hey, Nick. Nick here. Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate your kind words about Peter's content. Happy to help get you started. I just let Sam, my partner, know about this. He loves Peter's work too, so it's great timing. And I'll give you a reply in a few minutes to dive into more detail. This is an actual email in my Gmail account that we've just pulled up. So that's pretty sweet. The really cool part about their UX is you actually get to adjust this, and you can make this as big as you want. So I don't know, if you just wanted a bunch of space in the middle, you can do this. It's kind of neat. I'm more used to a few other no-code platforms. So N8N's dedication or focus on minor aspects of the user experience to me has been very pleasant. But okay, so we just covered one node. Obviously, there are a variety of nodes in this workflow. There's an OpenAI node. If I double click on that, it'll open up here. And there's also a Gmail send message node as well. But as you can see, node structures don't change. They kind of all looks the same. We have some input on the left-hand side. We have some area where we can manipulate parameters in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, we have some way to get output. And then, in this middle section, there's just a bunch of fields, and these fields tend to depend on what module you are using. So that's kind of what the actual step-by-step process looks like if we were to be playing around in N8N, putting pieces together and stuff like that. If we head over to the top right-hand corner, you'll see there's an Open Nodes panel. If I give that a click, well, now we can see that there are a variety of options available to us if we wanted to extend this flow or do something different to it. So for instance, I could search a ton of nodes here, but let's hypothetically say that after we send this Gmail message, I wanted to do something in a project management platform, one called ClickUp. If I type ClickUp here, you'll see that N8N actually already has a native integration with ClickUp. And they tend to have pretty good native integrations. It's not the best, but it's pretty solid. The second that we click on it, you'll see that it exposes a bunch of different actions we could do. We could create checklists. We could create checklist items. We could create comments, folders. Basically anything that you could do on ClickUp, you can do through the N8N API connection as well. So I don't know, maybe I want to create a task. There you go. Give that a click. The second you create it, you need to select a credential to connect with. And so I could click create a new credential here, click OAuth 2, and then sign into my ClickUp account. But in my case, I already have a credential, so I don't actually have to do that just yet. And you can see, again, now we have a bunch of different fields here, right? So obviously, you need a little bit of playing around with any no-code tool to understand what each of these do. But if you did want to, whip up a flow that does this, or get a template, as I was mentioning earlier, that maybe does these first three parts and then add on some additional functionality, you could literally do so just by clicking this plus button, typing in the platform that you want, and then dragging that little arrow over into the subsequent module. Very straightforward stuff. Very cool. And I like how easy it is to drag and drop and move around this canvas and stuff like that as well. Okay, great. So I think you guys probably understand most of what's going on inside of both the canvas and the dashboard. The last thing I'm going to mention is, as I've talked about earlier, testing is a pretty big part of any no-code building process. They have the ability to test workflows very easily. If you just click test workflow, it'll go through left to right and basically execute all of the scenario, all of the nodes in the workflow. The reason why we can't run this is just because I've added a new node to the right-hand side of this, which was not properly configured. So if I delete that, if I mouse over this, and you can just drag, select an element, and then delete it, and then test the workflow, you'll see that it actually goes through and visualizes the running of all of this, which is pretty neat. So when the nodes turn green, we now see the workflow is executed successfully. If I double click on any of these, I can go in and actually see what the output was for that node run, which is pretty sweet. So that was the output of this node. If I feed into the next node, you see that it went in here on the left-hand side. We then transformed it. This is the output of that node, which, sort of depended on the AI logic here in the middle. And then on the right-hand side, that's the output of this node. And then this is the output of that node. When you send a message through Gmail, it just kind of tells you, hey, how's it going? Here's the ID of the message you sent, and so on and so forth. If I actually go into The email address that I used to send this, we can actually see it right over here. Hey Sam, Nick here, thanks for reaching out. I actually just received that email a second ago. So this is hooked up, it's live, it's ready to go. And yeah, in a nutshell, that's sort of how N8N looks. There's obviously a little bit more detail hidden behind a lot of these toggles and dropdowns and stuff, but I think I'll leave it for there, and then we'll pick up going into more detail as I actually build out our example system in a moment. Okay, great. So with that taken care of, let's move on to make.com. Now, make.com is pretty similar in, I guess, theory to N8N, but there are a couple of fundamental differences which we should chat about. So first of all, here is their landing page. I again just went out and then in a few minutes took a screenshot of it and pasted it over here. Nothing special. As you can see, they are nowhere near as dialed into the whole AI side of things. It just says build systems #with make. Well, let me tell you, they're a little bit older of a platform. And because they're a little bit older of a platform, I don't know, maybe they just don't have their finger on the pulse as much or something like that. But, they haven't really taken as much of the whole AI agent revolution, I want to say. They've certainly made some changes, especially recently, but yeah, definitely a little bit further behind on that AI front. That's not to say that it's not a great platform and you can't do really cool things with it. I have built my career off make.com and I've made well over $1 million using it. So just to give you guys some background, make.com, formerly called Integromat, was launched back in 2012. That actually is a plus if you think about it, because that means that they've had a long time to iterate and improve their product as well as gather user feedback. Also, it does mean that a fair bit of the platform is built using older technologies, so there's a bit of a trade-off. You're not going to find it as snappy as N8N, like we were playing around with it a moment ago. But the value there is that the features that they do have tend to be extraordinarily well grooved, I want to say. Now, it's simple, but it's also closed source. So in contrast with N8N, if N8N brands itself as open source and flexible, make.com kind of brands itself as like, hey, we're closed, but we're really, really easy for you to pick up. You could do something that, adds value to a business in 5 minutes, maybe even less. So you're not going to be fiddling with code. You're probably not going to be fiddling with servers unless you've done something super wrong. And you're definitely not going to be fiddling with any self-hosting. Make.com actually just manages everything in the cloud for you. So all you really have to do is just drag and drop modules across the screen. You don't have to deal with any of like the DevOps stuff. Now, just for self-awareness purposes, what I showed you back there with N8N was cloud hosted as well. So they're sort of on level playing grounds if we're talking sheerly cloud hosted. But if you were to self-host it, which as I mentioned, I may record a video on at some point in the future, and there are plenty of other videos that you could check out right now on YouTube about the topic if you'd like, you do have to do a fair amount of like development work. You have to sign up to a server, you have to add environment variables, you have to, connect to a repo and that sort of stuff. Even authentication in make.com is very, very straightforward. They include a ton of built-in native connections, way more than N8N does, probably owing to the fact that they're a little bit older. And all you really have to do is just click create a connection. 90% of the time, you will just automatically connect to your account, and then that's it. Now, as I mentioned, they have a ton of integrations. Basically, if it has a ready-made module for your favorite service, it's a one-click sort of deal, and then voila, you have a module that actually connects to some API or does some business thing. They have a very large user community, owing to the fact that they've been running a little while longer than N8N has. So there's obviously a lot of tutorials, templates, and blueprints and scenarios. I've definitely added a substantial percentage of that recently. But yeah, that just means you get a workflow up and running in a few minutes. So if I could just contrast the two platforms, just kind of philosophically, Make is polished, very simple, probably fewer things that you could do development-wise, but it works. And when it works really well. Whereas N8N is definitely more of the developer-friendly, flexible. You can do way more things with it. But you do kind of need to know a little bit, and there are some gotchas and stumbling blocks, which we'll see later. All right, let's chat a little bit about the concepts in make.com. They are quite different from N8N, so it's very important to know the difference between them. I'm going to cover them from a bird's eye view. This is what a make.com flow looks like. Instead of a workflow like in N8N, this is referred to as a scenario. Instead of nodes, like those little square ones that we saw earlier, these circular ones are referred to as modules. A trigger is sort of like the thing that begins the flow. And an action is everything else. Triggers just have this little circle with, in this case, it's a little electricity icon, but it can be a number of things. And yeah, the core building block of everything is just the scenario. It's a flowchart of interconnected modules, as I mentioned here. So we're going to dive in and actually play around with this. But before we do, there are a few differences between how they handle things. And I just wanted to cover them here. The first is bundles. So, basically, the way that make.com will work is it'll alert you every time that a module runs more than once. Or rather, if I back up a couple steps, when a module runs, if it outputs multiple bundles of data, aka if the output of the module is more than just one thing, it's a collection of things, a list, an array, whatever you want to call it, then every subsequent module runs a bunch of times. And so they alert you to this with these little bubbles when you run stuff. This ran once, this ran 7 times. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because this is a core part of Make.com's sort of philosophy that's different from N8N's. N8N had an execution, which is basically when the whole workflow gets executed. That's one execution. Well, Make.com doesn't work that way. It works in terms of operations. So instead of the entire workflow counting as one execution, basically every time a single module runs here, it counts as one operation, and you're billed based off of your operations usage. So for instance, a flow like this, we're at one little run of the module on the left-hand side and 7 runs of the module on the right-hand side. This would amount to 8 operations. And it's very important if you want to understand the billing and how it scales. There are also a few other things like filters. That's what this little gear icon is in the middle, which I'll touch on. And then routers, which allow you to branch and do cool things to create complex paths. And that's one of the reasons why I really like Make.com. It's just very simple and straightforward, I would say, once you get it. But the operations, billing and stuff like that is definitely one of the cons. Now, previously, like before with N8N, I showed you guys a little snippet of code there, a little bit of JSON with, I believe it was like the account level variables. Make.com sort of abstracts a lot of that code stuff away into just these nice little bubbles. This is a green little bubble called sheet. Look how friendly it is. If you drag and drop it into this field here, you'll be referencing the sheet. You can see we dragged and dropped this email address module, which is this one right over here. So they like to abstract a lot of the complexity behind just nice, pretty, cute UX. And then, in general, and, feel free to take a look at this resource. I'm obviously going to include it down below in the YouTube description. But in general, they just abstract a lot of their complexity away. It makes it a lot easier to build and troubleshoot automations, even if you have a very limited tech background. So Make.com is definitely like the beginner friendly of the bunch. Now I'm going to do a hands-on UX review and show you guys what it actually looks like to build stuff with. All right, so some user experience differences already, as you could see. This is the dashboard area of Make.com. There's a lot more going on, if I'm honest, than N8N. And I think that's just because this is an older software platform. So they've just found room to stick a bunch of shit everywhere. But essentially, if I just go to the very top left-hand corner, we have this dashboard here with a ton of different buttons. We start with the organization page, which is just the company, essentially, your company account. And you have pretty clear visualization of your operations, given how that's sort of like how you're billed and how they make their money. They try and put that first and foremost. So you can see I'm on the pro plan here with the price of $62, and I purchased 40,000 ops a month. And basically, I've used 1,324 of those operations. They break it down into like a daily graph so I could see. And, as I'm sure you could tell, I'm using substantially fewer operations than I'm paying for. So this kind of tells me, I might be able to downgrade my plan realistically. Although in the last few days, I've used a little bit more. They have a little data transfer widget here. I'll be real, in practice, nobody ever cares or uses this unless you're doing super like visual or video heavy applications. In practice, very few people are. There's a way to upgrade your plan here. Obviously, these guys are monetized as hell. You could buy extra ops over here. You can enable operations auto purchasing, which, if you hit the 40,000 cap, in my case, I just automatically buy another 10K more. And then there are a bunch of other tabs here, and I'm not going to cover every single one just because there's a lot to go off of. But probably the key are the teams. So you could actually add users to specific teams. This is sort of analogous to the projects in N8N, where you have different users that are capable of working on different projects. So you can see I have 2 users here. This is just one of my emails. This is another one of my emails, but I can invite however many I want with different types of roles. And then another thing that I want to touch on is if I go down here on the left-hand side and then go to scenarios, this is sort of where like the vast majority of your work is realistically going to live. This is a list of all the scenarios in my account. As you can see, I have a fair number because I've been working with Make.com for quite a while. And on the left-hand side here, we have folders, which is how I organize them. So because it's organized A to Z, I put a little naming convention here with 0, 0. That means that this is always going to be at the top. So example builds is always at the top. 0, 1, sales and marketing, all flows that correspond to sales and marketing, and kind of stick them here. Project management, finance, archived. This is an iterators and aggregators masterclass, one of my YouTube courses. And this is NSM Nixarive Media, which is sort of like my YouTube brand. So as you can see here, there's a ton of information, and just breaking it down kind of step by step, you have a list of active scenarios here, and then inactive scenarios here, and then concepts, which are something that basically nobody on Make.com, from my understanding, nobody that actually makes money with it actually uses, unfortunately. But anyway, let's actually click into one of these scenarios and just play around a little bit. Let me see, what would be a good one to do? Let's do this new ghost.org sign up to email roadmap. Let me show you guys what this looks like. When I give this a click, we're now entering the overview. And the overview includes the title of the scenario up here, the diagram, which is sort of like how it works. And on the right-hand side, it also includes all of its run history. So as you can see, Make and N8N, like they have the exact same core building blocks. They just frame it and represent them a little bit differently. A very big and common question I get is, Nick, what can N8N do that Make.com can't? Or what can Make.com do that N8N can't? The reality is both platforms can do the exact same thing. It's not a matter of if you can do something, it's just about how easy and how quickly you can do it. So anyway, moving on, if I give this diagram a quick click, I actually go into the scenario editor, and now I'm actually capable of, changing and mucking around and essentially manipulating the scenario. To walk you guys through how this works, if I click on this module here, it'll open up this ghost.org sign up, and then I have this URL. Anything called a webhook in any no-code platform is basically just like it's like a trigger that you can send a request to start a flow. And so services like Ghost have ways to send requests, and then you can catch those requests and then begin whatever flow you want. This is my trigger, obviously. So basically what happens is I will catch a webhook request from the service ghost.org, which is, by the way, just my blog. And basically anytime somebody signs up and enters their email address over here, we go through the rest of this flow, and then it sends an email. If I open up this little module, you can see that we're actually in like a module editor now. And we could see that there are fields here with those bright, shiny colored variables like we saw earlier. If you click on one of the fields, it'll actually open up all the data coming in from previous flows. So you see member, current, previous. Now I'm not going to click current here just because there is undoubtedly going to be some user information, but this essentially just stores and caches the last request. So you can actually see the data that the last run of your scenario output. So very similar in nature to the input and the output flow in N8N. I will say I don't really think it's laid out anywhere near as nicely. If you think about it, the input to this email module should be the webhook, but it's kind of over here on the right. It's, it automatically changes depending on where you are on the, not the canvas, but on their like little editor window. I don't know. I'm not as much of a fan. I definitely like what N8N did with that a little bit more. But yeah, that's more or less how that works. Just like we had different fields in N8N, we also have fields in Make for every module. So since this is an email module, some expected fields are probably going to be subject, right? Content type, content. Scroll down a little bit here. Actually, or at the bottom, there's a show advanced settings here. Make.com, owing to the fact that it tries to be as user-friendly as possible, they hide away a lot of the complexity. So most of the time, if you want to do like the super cool shit, you got to show the advanced settings to basically everything. But as you can see, we could add copies, we could add blind copies, CCs, BCCs. We could change the from fields, the sender, the reply to, add some references, add some headers, priority. Even me at this point, I've been using this platform for, probably over half a decade at this point, at least. I don't know what every field does. There's just no real point to. And that's really the cool part about Make. You don't really have to. The only fields that you actually have to know are the bold ones. So you have to have a connection. You have to save the message after sending. You have to have an email address, content type. But that's about it. As long as you have those, you're basically good to go. Speaking on connections, by the way, if you click on this add button at the top, you can then set up whatever connection you want. And basically, if you're sending an email, you kind of need to connect to your email provider. So there's three different types. There's Google, there's Microsoft, and then there's one called Others, which is just like a catch-all for all other email accounts. I don't know, you have one with hosting or something like that. This is probably where you'd click. So if you wanted to set up like a Google, for instance, you can then add a name over here, and let's just say YouTube example. I click Save. It'll actually open up my Gmail, and it'll allow me to pick one of my accounts, which is kind of neat. Then I can click an account, authorize it, and then it's literally, as simple as like a 2-button click away to authorize your flow, which is pretty nice. Second that's done, it would normally say, congratulations, authorization completed, then you're good to go. I just exited it out halfway through, so that's not going to happen with me, but yeah. Okay, cool. So just doing in parallel to what I was doing with the N8N stuff, how about if I wanted to add something to this? Why don't we add our ClickUp example from earlier? There are a variety of ways to add a new module in a Make.com flow. The simplest one is on the right-hand side here. It says add another module. If I click this, it'll create a shadow module here, which I can then scroll all the way through and find the platform or service that I want to implement. Now, just for the purposes of this example, I'm just going to scroll a little bit. You guys see that little scroll, thing in the top right-hand corner here? Look at how little it's moving. I could scroll all day, basically. All day, and we wouldn't even make it halfway through. This is a testament to just how many modules there are in Make.com. Make.com being older and better, maybe not better, but like better propagated or whatever, better marketed at least, means that it's connected to a ton of platforms. A ton of platforms have native integration. So you could find basically anything that you could ever possibly want on here. And if you can, as I mentioned, it's pretty easy to do so with, to do a connection anyway with webhooks and stuff. So ClickUp, let's do the same thing we were doing before, create a task. Okay. We already have my connection set up, which is nice. From here, we just need to connect to the specific workspace. And then, yeah, as you see, Make.com, just owing again to its UX, they abstract away a lot of the complexity, right? Like the next field is only popping up when I fill out the previous field because it doesn't really want to scare me. It doesn't really want me to get overwhelmed. So I'm not going to go through and run the whole connection, but basically what's happening every time I click this button is it's actually calling ClickUp's API, it's getting the data, and then it's listing them for me. And then finally at the very end, we have a bunch of fields that are filled. So that's how you would add something to a Make.com flow. Now there are a few more buttons I want to click down at the checkout down at the bottom. The first is this run once. Remember at the end of our N8N example, we had a little button at the bottom where we could test the workflow. This is basically the same thing in Make.com. So now because this is a webhook, it's waiting for data. So in order for me to test this, I would have to send some data to it. But there's also this little green check mark that says immediately as data arrives. I can actually turn this on or off as I want. So if I turn this off, it's not going to be running, obviously. If I turn this on, this webhook will be live and it'll actually just go through my flow in the background anytime I receive a request. Aside from that, a bunch of other buttons, which I think in Make.com are just laid out a lot simpler. Simpler, is that a word? I don't know. I don't English good. And then there are a bunch of other settings here, which are sort of above the pay grade for the explanation that I'm providing right now. But if you spend any amount of time in Make.com, you will inevitably, interact with them. Okay, great. So that's where we are with Make.com's basic UX. Next up, I actually want to go through and I want to build a system with both platforms. It's one thing to just watch me talk about a platform or poke around. It's another thing entirely to build something that's like business functional, that actually drives some sort of outcome. And that's really what I was referring to at the beginning of this, which is when I said that I want to take more of like an economical view on these platforms. You can build anything with this stuff. I mean, this is like a programming language. It's just a visual programming language, right? So just like you could program anything in practice, you could also drag and drop anything in practice. But I find a lot of the time, if you're using a no-code platform, it's because you want to like do something for a business, right? A lot of the time, it's not like you want to like compose symphony orchestra music or paint a Van Gogh. Like you're probably here because you want to make some freaking money and you don't want to have to spend the time and energy that you need to learn programming to do it. And the thing that I'm seeing is there's a big disconnect between people that like get on these no-code platforms and they make these flows, and then the ability of these flows to like make actual money. There's a big disconnect there. And in this video, what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you guys a practical example that I know has made me and a lot of other people money as well. And these flows are a lot simpler than the complex ones that you probably see thrown all over social media and LinkedIn and Twitter. The flows that actually end up making you a lot of money, they tend to be the simpler ones that, you kind of look at from afar and you're like, I can put that together in 10 minutes. Well, if you could put it together in 10 minutes, it's a pretty good start. The one that I'm going to do today is an email categorization system. So most companies still use emails as their primary form of comms, but those emails can get pretty overwhelming after all, especially for contact at emails, info at emails, and hello at mailboxes. The reason why is because these tend to aggregate mail from many sources. So a very common need nowadays is to categorize each email, and this is usually done through labels. If you're using Gmail or something, there are a bunch of labels you can create. I'll run through how that works in a moment, but what we're going to do here is I'm going to build a system that basically takes in an email. It'll use that as a trigger. And then it'll use artificial intelligence to categorize that email depending on its contents. Once we've categorized that email, we are then going to add a label to it. And then if it is one of a few of the categories, and I have no idea because I haven't actually put this thing together yet, we're going to do it all together and live. If it's one of, like the low ROI categories, the not very urgent categories, we'll mark it as red, just so that we can get closer to inbox zero and not have a bunch of stuff clogging up our mail. After I'm done with all this, I'm going to share both the N8N share link. I'll download it and I'll make it accessible, and the Make.com blueprint in the description. So if you guys are just starting out on these platforms, maybe you can kind of play around with it practically yourself in order to help make a decision. Okay, great. So let's actually jump in and build this platform. I'm going to start with N8N just because I started with N8N for my explanations. I think that makes more sense. And then after that, we're going to move over to Make.com. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave our example scenario, or oh boy, you can tell the make.com's coming at me because every second word I have to be like, all right, what's the N8N term for this? I'm going to exit out of the N8N workflow, and I'm going to add a new workflow. And this workflow is going to be our email categorization system. Now, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to explain a hotkey. Instead of me going up here to the top right-hand corner, clicking a button every time, if you just press tab, it'll open up automatically. Pretty neat, right? I'm then going to type in Gmail, press enter, and then the trigger that I want is on message received, okay? So on message received, what I want to happen is I want to categorize the email. Now the credential I'm going to connect with, I have a bunch of different accounts I could, but I'm just going to create a new credential. I'm going to sign in with Google. And then let me think, I have a ton of accounts here, but why don't I use Nick at leftclick.ai. Select all, make sure you trust the source that is connecting to your account. Then I'm going to click continue. As you see, a little bit of polish is still necessary. It says got connected. The window can be closed now. Okay, fine. And now we have this green notification that the account was connected. I'm going to exit out of this. And now that it's connected, we can actually do stuff with it. What stuff? Good question. Let me, first of all, set some parameters. So how quickly do we want this to pull our email inbox? Every minute, every hour, every day, every week? I don't know. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to pull this let's just do every 1 hour, hypothetically. I mean, this is completely arbitrary, right? Because I'm just doing this for a test, but maybe we just want this to run once an hour. The event is going to be message received. And then there's this little simplify button here. I'm going to keep this on for now, but I'll turn this off afterwards and I'll show you guys why. And then there's some filters here. We can add a filter. So we could include spam and trash if we wanted to. We could add a filter for label names, right? I got a ton of labels here, as you can see. There's a bunch of other stuff. I'm just going to exit out of this. We could search for specific emails using Gmail filters. So I don't know, subject, Nick, you are so awesome. There are way too few of those in my mailbox. Okay, and then add filter, read status, unread, unread and read emails, right? Anyway, the point that I'm making is there's basically just always going to be a ton of settings on anything to do with a major API like Gmail. Now that we've done this, why don't we just go and we fetch a test event? It's going to fetch a test event here. And as you see, the test event that we fetched was the email that I just sent from another email address of mine a moment ago, which says, hey, Sam, Nick here. Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate your kind words from blah, 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 blah. This was the input, me fetching the test event. This is the output. Now, what I'm going to do, just the purposes of this demo, is I'm just going to pin this. If you go to the top right-hand corner, click pin, what you're doing is you're basically just forcing N8N to just always use this as the test data moving forward. And this is important to do because it just simplifies your flow. It also means anytime I want to test this, I don't have to go back here and click this button all the time. Okay, great. So that's that. Why don't I jump over to my actual Gmail account now? Why don't we see what sort of labels we want to create? So why don't we do this really quickly? You see how here on the right-hand side of it, I actually already have a bunch of labels already because I did something similar in the past. So cold outreach, general Q&A, Gumroad notifications, invoices and receipts, MMWM, maker school, public relations, sponsorship requests, transactional emails, unknown. Actually, these are fine. So I'm just going to use these labels. But if you want to make new labels, you just click on this button. You can make whatever label you want here. You can also nest labels under parents, which is pretty neat. But I'm not going to do that. The Gumroad notifications are because I still want to have Gumroad notifs. I just don't necessarily want to, I don't want to archive all of them, but I just don't want my inbox to be filled with them because I get 10 downloads every few minutes. Okay, great. So if you think about it logically, we've successfully enabled our flow to get data from my email address. What do we have to do now? Well, we need to do some sort of processing and categorization. After we're done with the processing or categorization, then we can assign it a label, and that's about it. And the cool news is in N8N, and not in make.com, but in N8N, this feature is very easy to do. I'm just going to open my nodes panel, and then I'm just going to type in categor. Actually, I lied. I'm going to go to advanced AI, and then I'm going to go down to text classifier, not categorization, but text classifier. This will classify my text into distinct categories, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to give that a click. Now, we have this window here that says text to classify. You'll also see on the left-hand side it says wire me up. So what we need to do, and kind of annoying that UX-wise that we have to exit out of this every time, but hey, I didn't invent it. What we have to do is we have to drag this little plus over to the right-hand side, connect to this little almost magnetic clip here. And now we've connected our flow, so the data will flow from the Gmail trigger over to the text classifier. Pretty neat. If we double click this, you'll see that pinned data from before is now present on the left-hand side. Now we can actually do something with it. So if you think about it logically, like what is it that we want to classify? We want to classify the data, right? The text. I will say this doesn't actually include the full email. So we need to fix that. Remember how before I said there's the simplify button? I'm actually going to unclick this, and then I'm going to click fetch test event. And now, instead of it being, just those few fields like we saw earlier, we actually have way more detail, and it includes the full email as well. This is just one of those quirks of this Gmail trigger module node that you just have to know, unfortunately, in order to be able to use right. But okay, great. So if you think about it, what is the text I want to classify? It literally asks me here in this little window, use an expression to reference data in previous nodes or enter static text. What I want to classify is I want to classify this text. Okay. And as you see, this now is populated with some code, essentially, which is kind of neat. This is one of the reasons why N8N can be pretty intimidating if you're a total newbie to programming and just systems in general, because you see code like this with the curly brackets, and you're like, what the hell's going on? What the hell's a $? What's JSON, right? What's .text? How does any of this make sense? But essentially what this is doing is this is referencing the previous node that was run, and then it's pulling out the text parameter or text variable, which is this one right over here. And N8N just happens to have a naming convention where the previous node that was run is always just $JSON. And then they also have a convention where if you wrap text with these two curly brackets on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, it converts it from just like static text into some sort of function. So that's just me explaining a little bit about how this works. Keep in mind, all no-code platforms have their own, unfortunately, sometimes annoying conventions, but this is N8N. So as you see, something really helpful here is it shows us what the data that we are now populating this text to classify field is. We're actually pulling it directly from this text variable, right? And then it says result, hey Sam, Nick here. Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate blah, 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 blah. So that's nice. Our next step is we have to make categories. If you think about it logically, what I want to do is that when an email comes in, I want to categorize it and then label it. So I need to create the categories that I'm going to be using to add the label. In order to find this out, I'm just going to go back here and just take a quick peek at everything. Cold outreach, general Q&A, Gumroad notice, invoices and receipts, MMWM and Maker School, public relations, sponsorship request, transactional emails unknown. I'm going to start with cold outreach. So add category, cold outreach. There's a description field too, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But for now, I'm just going to add a bunch more categories. And let's just do, you know what? Instead of doing what, like 5 or 6 or whatever, let's just do 4. Yeah, that's simpler. We're not going to go through all of these. Next, we'll just do general Q&A. Next, we'll do Gumroad notifications. And then next, we'll do invoices and receipts. Okay, great. So N8N actually has this built-in text classifier. Just so you guys know, under the hood, what this is doing is this is using artificial intelligence to take a query and then assign it a category based off of the text here. So the very cool thing is I don't need to do anything aside from just like give it a category name, and it'll actually do like pretty reasonable, which is pretty neat. So I could literally just like run it and then it would do fine. But it's good practice in situations like this, in any sort of categorization flow, to always add an unknown. And the unknown is just like the catch-all in case the AI doesn't really know what next step to do. So that's what I've done down here. I've just added a little unknown variable. But honestly, this is honestly sufficient for us to like move forward with this. We're going to test this really quickly and then see if I need to add a description. If not, we'll just proceed. Click test step. It says a model subnode must be, oh yes, a model subnode must be connected. The way that this text classifier works is you need to hook this up to an AI model, and that's one thing that I forgot here. Just zooming out, now that we're back on the canvas, we can see that we've basically added a bunch of categories here. This is basically a bunch of like if statements. Hey, if the category is cold outreach, then we can continue this way. If the category is general Q&A, continue this way. If it's Gumroad, continue this way. So that's pretty neat. But in order to make this work, we need to add this little model, which I forgot about. So the way that text classifiers work, again, is they send it over to AI. N8N is pretty flexible in that it allows you to choose the AI that you want to do the classification with. So if I click on this button, you can see I have a bunch of different models I could choose from. The one that's the most popular and probably the one that most of you guys are going to use is OpenAI one. Up here, it tells us what it's connected to, which is this OpenAI module, which is kind of neat. I like that part of their UX. But anyway, I've already set up my OpenAI account credentials. If you wanted to add your own, you'd click Create New Credential here. Then it'll ask you for the API key. If you don't know anything about this, just head over to the Open Docs, and it'll tell you where you find all of this. So it'll actually say, hey, if you want to generate your API key, go here, click on this page, click Create Secret Key, and then copy the key and add it in. Hey, go over here, paste the organization ID in. So for posterity, I'm actually going to go and do that. Okay, great. So I have the organization ID right over here in my OpenAI account. I just went to beta or platform.openai.com/settings/organization/general. And then I have the organization ID. So I'm just going to give that a little click, head back over to my N8N organization ID, paste that in. Then I'll grab the API key as well. The way that you get the API key here is you got to go to the API key section, create a new secret key. And as you can see, I already had one that's N8N testing actually. Let's just go N8N YouTube example N8N testing. I don't know if I need a project. I'll just click default and then I'll create secret key. I now have a key that I can copy. I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to paste it in. Dang, that's a long key. Then we're going to click save. Okay, great. Now we've connected to OpenAI. We're done with that rigmarole. We can move on. The model that we're using, GPT-4o mini, I'm just going to use GPT-4o. In all honesty though, like you could use basically whatever model you want for something that's simple. It'll perform reasonably well. Okay, now that that's good, let's just make sure that everything else is filled out. And now let's try testing the step. Cool. So what this has done is it's basically passed into our OpenAI model down here. And then it's outputted code based off of a specific format that N8N provided it for the functionality of this module, which is JSON. And it said cold outreach true, general Q&A false, gumroad notifications false, invoice and receipts false, unknown false. So it's saying, hey, this outreach is cold outreach, which is basically true, right? I mean, it is obviously responding to something of the nature of cold outreach, which is nice. So we also see that the UX changed quite a bit up here. And the reason why is because the second that you use a text classifier, any sort of if, else, or true or false, it separates the outputs into branches. So it's telling us that like the cold outreach branch worked, but the general QA branch, gumroad notifications branch, invoice and receipts branch, and unknown branch, that didn't work. So just for the purposes of this example, why don't I send myself an email that I want classified as an invoice and receipt? Then let's see if it does a reasonable job. And if it does, then we can proceed with this and we can actually finish the rest of our flow. So first things first, I'm going to go over here and then I'm going to unpin this. Then I'm just going to go over to a different email address. What did I connect to? Was it nick@leftclick.ai? I believe it was, yeah. So I'm going to go over here and then let's actually send myself an email from this here. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to email myself and I'll say re-invoice for A39E FLG processed. Hello, Nick. Your invoice for blank is below. Please see attachment. Thank you, head office. Cool. So I think if anybody were to receive an email like this, you'd probably say that it was an invoice and receipt based email, right? Now that we're back in N8N, why don't I then check and fetch a test event and see what happened? Okay, so scrolling through this puppy, you can see is we've received the email that says invoice for A39E FLG process. That sounds pretty invoicey to me. Let's see what the text classifier thinks of this. I'm just going to double click it. We have the email here. Let's test step. Let's see what the output is. Cold outreach branch, no. General QA, gumroad notifications, invoices, and receipts branch, one item. Fantastic. So as you see, this is correctly classified our email as being in the invoices and receipts. So that's great. What do we do with this now? Well, we basically want to add some labeling functionality to it, right? So now that we've done the Gmail trigger, why don't we just click over here? And then why don't I go to Gmail again? And what I want to do is add label. You can see this is literally the first message action, which is great. I'm going to connect this to my Gmail account. I believe it was number 2. The resource is message, operation add label. That's good. Message ID, label names or IDs. Oh, nice. Yeah, I can actually just pick. Wonderful. Cool. Let's add this to the first step. So that's cold outreach, right? I don't know why we don't have any data here. Maybe we need to rerun this. Oh, you know why? It's because our cold outreach branch did not execute. Actually, the only thing we technically have access to, which is one of the annoying parts about this, is the invoices and receipts branch right now. So I'm just going to duplicate this by copying and then pasting, Command-C, Command-V. And I'm going to grab this invoices and receipts, connect it to my Gmail. You'll see we now have the data accessible to us on the left-hand side. Then I'm going to scroll down here to where it says invoices and receipts. Then for message ID, I just want to grab this ID value right here. Again, we're going to fill in with JSON.id. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this step. And you see that it did indeed label my email, which is quite nice. So now we have the email labeled. I go back over here. If I give this a click, you see it now has invoices and receipts on it, which is pretty neat. Okay, cool. Now, if we were to test the rest of this, so gumroad notifications, general Q&A and cold outreach, what we need to do is we basically need to run each of these routes, essentially. So I'm just trying to think of the simplest way for me to do this. I could just set some mock data, right? I could just set some mock data. So let's do the cold outreach again. So in order to edit the data, you just click on this button here. I'm just going to scroll down to where it says text. I say, hello, Nick. I am interested in selling you a product or service. Would you respond, please? Thank you. Alter ego. Save. Now, if we scroll down to text, you'll see that that is the value of this. So the future modules now, text classifier, for instance, should be taking in that text as an input. If we test this now, the cold outreach branch is going to run. And now from here, we can actually get that data in, then drag the message ID in to our text classifier, which is pretty neat. Okay, great. From here on out, I'm just going to duplicate these. 1 for general Q&A, 2 for Gumroad. We have note of invoices and receipts, and then we have for unknown. The thing about N8N, which I don't really like, it just calls everything like, it just iterates things. So it's Gmail, Gmail 2, Gmail 3, Gmail 1, Gmail 4, for instance. It'd be kind of neat if, I don't know, there was some more context around this and it wasn't just iterating numerically, but it is what it is. So general Q&A here, Gumroad notifications here, and then unknown. If I can select this, we'll go down over here. Then for general Q&A, we can actually just use this message ID, and this should work because we're just taking the exact same name of the variable from the previous run. I'm just going to change this so that instead of cold outreach, it is, was it Gumroad notifs? Hold on, I think it was general Q&A, right? Yeah, sorry, that was general Q&A. So we'll go down to general Q&A, good. This one here will be Gumroad notifications. This one down here, invoices and receipts, as we already talked about. And then this one down here will be unknown. Let's just delete this and then we'll go unknown. Perfect. Very cool. Okay, sweet. Now, last thing I'm going to do, just for my own simplicity, is I'm going to rename all these. You can use this with the hotkey F2. So click this, rename this, and then I'll say label cold outreach. And I'm just doing this for my own sanity. I just know myself, and I know that if I don't do this, you know, like a month from now when I look at this, I'll say, what the hell are all these for? Invoices and receipts. Oops. You can also just reverse anything by Command Zing it. This one was invoices and receipts. And this last one here is unknown. Can never spell unknown properly the first time. You guys ever get that? There's just like some word that your fingers do not want to form. Some evolutionary lineage is like, no, you must not. Okay, great. So yeah, that's more or less that. That's the system, to be honest. We are done this. We can now send it whatever emails we want. It'll just go through the thing, labeling them. There's also a couple of other things like you think that we could do. Like for instance, if it's a Gumroad notification, you know, maybe in addition to me adding a label, I also want to mark it as red. So I kind of want to do both. Logically, oh, sorry, this was Gumroads. Let's go back here. Logically, if I wanted to do that, then I could just add another module, Gmail. Then instead of add label, mark a message as red. And I just add this over here. And voila. You can think of it as like lower ROI, lower value emails I don't really care about. I could probably just go $JSON.id, and this would reference the previous node, as long as it outputs a node that includes an ID, right? We just really quickly test this and make sure. Yeah, it does include a message ID, which is nice. And now we're marking that as red, maybe. Yeah, and then also maybe we want to do that for the cold outreach too, because we, you know, if somebody's reaching out to us cold, odds are we don't really give a shit. And then here I'll just say mark red. And here I will also mark red. Beautiful. And that's our flow. Just for the purposes of this test, why don't we go through and we just add questions, do a Gumroad notif one. We've already done the labels, invoice, and receipts, but then we'll do one for unknown as well. So I'm just going to edit my text again. And then for text, instead of this, we'll do, hello, Nick. This is a notification from Gumroad. Your order is ready. Thanks, Gumroad. That is now the text. We are then going to classify this text. The output is now going to be Gumroad. We can go down our Gumroad notifications. We can test the step. I'll now label my email as Gumroad. Very cool, right? We could do the same thing with unknown. Maybe I will go over here, and then what if I were to hypothetically to get an email that was just, I don't know, some alien that does not know English, does not know human language, and only speaks in hexadecimal, sends me an email. What's it going to classify it as? Hopefully unknown, right? So the unknown branch worked. And then let's just do one final one for posterity, the general Q&A. So we'll go text. I think it was down here, right? Not sure why it's not coming up. Hi, Nick. Just had a general question about XYZ. Would you mind helping me with? Cool. Then we are going to run this puppy. We'll go down my general Q&A branch, and then we will go over here, test this, and we'll run that flow as well. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how long that N8N flow took, but as I'm sure you guys could tell, if you know a little bit about no code, whether or not you're a professional with N8N or the specific platform, you can usually get by. It's fairly reasonable and fairly straightforward. Now that I've built that system in N8N, I think you guys have a reasonable understanding of how to do simple things with this platform. Keep in mind that I didn't have any complex logic here. There were no looping flows or anything like that, which can be a little bit more complicated for N8N. I just wanted to show you guys what an actual business-ready flow could look like with just a few minutes of work. What we're going to do now is we're going to build this exact same system, but we're going to do it in make.com instead. So you guys could see the parallels and then the differences too. So let's open up a new scenario. Let's call this email categorization. Let's call it system. And then in make.com, instead of what we were doing before, where we had to pull the emails consistently, there's actually a much easier way to do this. You could actually just go straight off of a mail hook. So, well, actually, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to try and build the exact same system. Let's not get complicated. I take that back. We're going to click this purple button, and we're going to type in email, and we're going to type in watch emails. Now we're going to make a connection. It's Google restricted for Nick at leftclick.ai. I'm going to call this YouTube example. Then I'm going to, again, do the connection, just like I did with N8N for Nick Sarif, that email there. From there, we are now connected. And as you can see, it automatically deletes the window and stuff, just kind of nicer UX, which is cool. And then from here, I can select the folder that I want to watch my emails in. So the folder I want to watch is just my inbox, honestly. The criteria for this will be all emails, sure. Sender email address, recipient email address, subject. I don't know about subject. Let me check. What was the email that I just got? Left click, re-invoice for a whatever processed. Let's try that. Let's just say invoice. Mark messages as read, no. Maximum results 1, yeah, sure, that sounds good. So again, none of these fields are required. I'm just going to be filtering it based off a subject line of invoice just because I only want to get that email. I don't want to get other people's emails and stuff. So great. We will select the first email ourselves, I guess. Let's see. It should sort it out for us. There we go. If I right click this and I run this module only, what do we get now? We get the data from my email address. We've effectively hooked this up now, just like we did previously in N8N, to make.com. We've now gone from Gmail, which is a standalone platform, to Make. Now we have the data here. We can actually do cool stuff with it. All right. So hello, Nick, your invoice for whatever is below. Please see attachment. Hello. Thank you, head office. How do we actually go about categorizing this? Well, unfortunately, make.com does not have a built-in categorization feature. So we actually have to do it ourselves. But that's okay because I'll show you guys how easy it is. All we need to do is go to Apps, OpenAI. Then down here, you'll see there are a ton of different modules you could choose. Batches, upload files, generated audios. The one that you're going to want in 99% of cases is going to be create a completion. This create a completion prompt is basically like the bread and butter of working with AI in make.com. So select a method will be create a chat completion. Model will be GPT-4o. Then we're going to write our own prompt. And now this is, not just a text classification thing, which kind of does handle a lot of the work in the background for you. But we're going to do the AI stuff ourselves. And so as you can see, there's differences between these platforms like Make is much easier in terms of user interface everywhere else, but then they lack some of the AI features that N8N has. N8N is definitely a little more developer oriented, and there's some code thrown around and stuff like that. But it's easier to use the AI features. So, anywho, developer system prompt. What we have to do is you are a helpful, intelligent, let's do administrative assistant. Then under here, we'll go user, and then I'll say, your task is to categorize incoming emails into the following labels. And I believe we had cold outreach. Let's just do this. Cold outreach was a general Q&A, Gumroad notifications, invoices and receipts, unknown. Return your answer in JSON as follows. We'll say category, and then I'll say category goes here. So I'm basically telling it, hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to return your answer in JSON. This is like a code format that N8N use, sort of hid away from us, like this. So category might be cold outreach, general Q&A, Gumroad notifications, invoices and receipts, or unknown. I'll show you why I'm doing this in a second, but just in order to make this flow work well, we need to do one more thing. We need to head to this response format button and then go JSON object and then parse JSON response. This is just sort of a quirk of using this particular module, but it's one that we have to use in order to make this work right. Okay, great. One more thing is go to add messages and then go user. Then the text content, we're just going to add in the text content of the email. So that's that. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. And as you can see, Make is pretty colorful with it. I'm going to click OK. Now, next up, what I'm going to do is, if I click run once, the downside about Make versus N8N is a big issue is the testing flow. If I want to test based off of like old data, I can't. I need to rerun the flow over and over and over and over again. I'm convinced that Make specifically does this because they're trying to get you to use as many operations as humanly possible. And this is kind of like a quick little hack that can get you to spend a few more cents here or there, as opposed to just cache the data for you, make it really accessible. I don't know. I might just be a conspiracy theorist. Who knows? They're turning our frogs gay. But yeah, anyway, let's actually run through this and let's make it happen. The way that I would do this in practice is make.com allows you to right-click a module and run it only. So then you can actually insert your own test data. So anyway, we have a bunch of categories here. Why don't I do the first one? Hey, Nick. I know we haven't talked before, but I would like to sell you a product or service. Would you mind ... So if I provide this email to my categorization system, what should I get? Pause the video if you don't have the answer right away. I should be getting cold email as a response. So if I go down here to the output, which is all of the variables that this particular API call outputs, and I go to result, the category is indeed cold outreach. Pretty cool. All right, let's run this again. I'll just do one more for posterity. Hey, Nick, I had a general question about this ... And we'll click OK. What should we be getting now? We should obviously be getting general Q&A. So as you can see, these AI models do pretty well with basically no direction. Like we didn't have to give it any context or anything. It did all right. Okay, what do we want to do now? Well, I actually want to see if I could label an email. I actually don't know if we could do this in the emails module, interestingly enough. No, I think we have to move an email. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Let's see if there's labels here. Because some platforms call things folders. Yeah, okay, no. So this is a general purpose email module. And because it's a general purpose email module, it doesn't use the term label, which I believe is Gmail or maybe Outlook specific. Instead, it calls them folders. So what we do is we move it from the source folder to the destination folder. So let me run you through how this would work in make.com. As you remember in N8N, we had like 10 modules or something. In Make, you can theoretically do this in like 3. You could have the watch emails, AI, and then this one here. And I'll run you through what that looks like. First thing we have to do is you have to go to email ID. And then I'm just going to scroll through until I find the email ID variable I need to map. So that's good. Then for source folder and then destination folder, for source, my incoming emails are always going to be in inbox, if you think about it, right? The destination folder, this is the thing that's going to depend. Hypothetically, if I click cold outreach, if I click on this little tab thing, map, I actually get the name of the category for the destination folder. So I don't actually have to like manually click it here. I can actually dynamically map it, which is crazy, right? So I'm just going to make sure that the label names are the same as the categories that are being output. Cold outreach was cold outreach, general Q&A, Gumroad notifications, invoices and receipts, and unknown, right? If I click here and I click result, you see that the category name is the exact same text. So what I could theoretically do So I can just map this to be the category. So now, instead of me having, what we had before, which is, if we just go back here, we had 1, 2, you can make that count if you want, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So far, we only have three in our flow, which is pretty sweet, honestly. A lot simpler, I would say. So yeah, that's that for now. One more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add another module called mark an email as read. I'm just going to stick that on the very end. And I'm going to add an email ID here from the move an email. You can select, all of the variables in Make all the way back to the very first one in the flow. So we could select this one. So maybe I will select this one. It's always just better practice to do the first one. And then the folder that this is going to be in, if you think about it, it's going to be this folder, right? Because we just moved it to this folder a second ago. So that should mark our email as read. The thing is, we don't want it to mark it as read on all of them. We only want to mark it as read on some of them. So in order to do that, make.com has this filter function, which makes it really easy. So let's only mark it as read if it's a Gumroad notification. I believe that was, and cold outreach. The condition I'm going to look for is I'll look to see if category is equal to cold outreach, or if category is equal to Gumroad notification. If we are fulfilling this filter, if and only if it is Gumroad notification or cold outreach, will we proceed? So we basically taken that other flow, which was honestly pretty big, and just made it like a lot simpler. So let's actually see what this looks like. I'm going to go, let's run this module only. Let's choose where to start first. Sorry. I just want to make sure I'm always getting the same email here. Let's go right over here. Click OK. Just make sure that all of our data is set up right. I believe it is. Cool. Yeah, we should be fine. Anyway, let's just give it a go. Click run once. Beautiful. And it looks like it ran through. As you see here, this filled with a 0 number. That's because it was not Gumroad or cold outreach. But let me show you what all the data looked like. Make.com outputs the outputs through these little bubbles, as opposed to like left to right like N8N does. So as you can see, it pulled this email. Hello, Nick, your invoice for blank is below. Please see attachment. Thank you, head office. That's the one that we wrote, 15, 20 minutes ago. AI then outputted a result, which was invoices and receipts. We then use the move an email module. It only outputs the a return of the ID of the thing it just moved. So nothing fancy there. And then because this did not run, it did not do anything. If I go back to my email here, then I go to, where was this? Invoices and receipts. We see that the invoice was processed. Now, I probably should have been smarter about this because we use the same email ID to test all the N8N flows. We've also labeled as cold outreach and general Q&A and Gumroad notifications. But the most recent label was invoices and receipts, which is why it's here. So that's that in make.com. As I'm sure you guys could see, these systems are honestly pretty similar. They're not, the exact same, but if you think about what they can do, yeah, they're quite similar. They have different ways or paths of getting there. But if you dial back the complexity, one code platform, no code platform is another node code platform, which is the same as another no code platform. You could have done the exact same thing that I did here in Zapier. You could do it in, I don't know. There are a bunch of other no code platforms that are coming up, but the names are sort of escaping me at the moment. So that's where we're at with that. Let's move on to some major differences in UX and functionality, just to round out this review, because I know we're getting pretty high up there in terms of time. If you're still with me, what the hell is wrong with you? No, I'm just kidding. If you're still with me, this is going to be probably another 20 or 30 minutes or so of us talking about module availability, JSON and code integration, the flow control differences, the testing, authorization flows, that sort of stuff. I'm also going to mention some AI features, AI agents, obviously being the big one, before we close it out. So yeah, let's start with module availability. I've also included a winner here. So I think that the winner in module availability is Make. If we go back to N8N here, and then I click on this plus arrow on the right-hand side, then I type action in an app, and I scroll through. Don't get me wrong, there are lots of platforms, but I don't know, in total, maybe a couple hundred, right? These are all the platforms that N8N is natively connected to. Whereas if we go back over here to Make, we click on this plus button, scroll through. I mean, that's probably to where N8N was. So I don't have a numeric way of figuring this out, but I'd say make.com is probably at least 15 to 20, maybe 25 times as many platforms. And that's not taking into account community platforms and stuff either, although I don't really know if that's fair, considering that N8N probably has some community functionality as well. But yeah, I guess the point that I'm making is, since Make.com has been around a little bit longer, if you're just looking for like direct out of the box connections that just tend to work, Make.com is probably your better bet. It's definitely substantially more streamlined to get up and running as opposed to you having to make your own API calls or that sort of thing. Okay, the next is JSON and code integration. So, as I mentioned earlier, if we click on label general Q&A, we scroll in a little bit, message ID JSON.id. This is pretty interesting because we actually have like code in our no code or low code tool, I should say. And the really cool part about it is N8N actually allows you to use JavaScript just natively in any of these fields as long as you go over here and click expression. So for instance, if I just wanted to do something to this JSON.id, okay, I wanted to check if it starts with the number 3 or something. I can do that. I can literally do that. Let me check what this actually was. This is a 1. If I click 1 here, you see it just turned to true. 2, false. 1, true. So I can't understate how crazy this is to me as somebody that, kind of like back in the hood, man, like the Make.com hood, things were rough out there. We didn't have any JavaScript or anything like that. We had to make do with like built-in Make.com functions. The second that you sprinkle a little bit of code onto your no-code platform, like basically everything becomes possible very, very quickly and easily. Make doesn't really want to let you do that because obviously if you could just like do something like this with one little, like a few characters, then how are they going to make their money, right? Like obviously it's the simplicity and effectiveness of the no-code automation platform in a way is directly opposed to their ability to monetize if it's being billed on a per operations basis. So N8N definitely wins. There's no comparable feature in Make.com. The only thing that's even somewhat comparable is there's this third-party service called Custom.js, and this isn't even like Make's company. Like this is some other company that like built a way to do this. You can actually like add some code yourself in JavaScript, but as you see, it's nowhere near as dynamic. You don't get any feedback. You don't know when the code was sent or received. You don't have little tooltip windows that pop up. It's just nowhere near as dynamic, and you actually have to pay another platform in order to run JavaScript inside of Make, which is hilarious. So JSON and code integration, N8N wins hands down. It's not even close. I could show you, a bunch of other stuff here. Like you could literally make your own JavaScript window. You could write as much code as you want here, but I'm not going to because I think it's pretty clear who wins that one. Okay, the next up is flow control. N8N wins flow control. Now, what is flow control? Essentially, earlier I was talking about there being a number of ways to, or I was talking about how this is one of the simpler flows that you could build, right? How this is sort of like in one direction, it's unidirectional, you don't have like loopbacks and stuff like that. And it can get pretty complicated with that stuff, but in general, it's much more powerful and nuanced than anything that Make.com could hope to do. A good example of this is just this text classifier. As you see, this Gmail trigger feeds into a text classifier, which natively outputs like 5 different if-then statements. Okay. Cold outreach, general Q&A, Gumroad notifications, invoices and receipts, unknown. It just automatically does this built in. If we wanted to do something similar here in Make.com with a router, which is the equivalent function that kind of splits flows up, I would have to go and add a filter for every route. I have to say, category has to be equal to, cold outreach. I have to label it, and then I have to do that 6 times or however many times I did. So, for one, we just tend not to have that built-in kind of filtering or what's the term? Flow functionality. On the other hand, I find loops are just a lot better done in N8N. Now, I'm not going to show you an example of a loop here, but you can actually just like natively loop things back into each other in N8N. It's kind of crazy to me just to be able to do that, to drag the output of one function into the input of another. There is no native way to do this in Make. Like I can't kind of do that. And the main reason why is they just don't want to overcomplicate the hell out of the process for you. So instead, the way that it works is if your previous module outputs multiple bundles, then all subsequent modules will run for the same number of times, or they will run the same number of times that there are bundles in the previous module. If I give you guys a very simple example with a parse JSON module, which is just a way for me to convert JavaScript object notation into something that's accessible by Make.com. If we go array, and then I go here, and then I go 1, if I were to run this, what would happen is my first module would run once because I just outputted an array. I just converted this into make.com's format. So an array was produced with 3 elements. I then iterated over this array, which basically just means to turn an array of elements into 3 separate runs. So this is run number 1, bundle 1, run number 2, bundle 2, run number 3, bundle 3. Then it ran this set variable module 3 times. If I make the value of this the value, I run this again, you'll see that I don't really have like a looping feature, but we do run the same number of times that the number of bundles in the previous section are run. The same number of times as there are bundles in the previous section. What I mean by that is if the input to this is 1 bundle, then the output is that same bundle. But we didn't just input that 1 bundle, we output 3, and then 3 outputs were made simultaneously. So bundle operation 3 rather is has a value of 3. Operation 2 has a value of 2. Operation 1 has a value of 1, because that is the value that I extracted from the particular bundle run from that parse JSON module at the beginning. So without really beating a dead horse at this point, I'm just going to call it there. But N8N is certainly far, far better than make.com in flow control. They have the ability to filter just like make.com does, but then also have built-in ifs, loop over items. They can merge data from 2 different data sets. They have built-in error handling. It's fantastic. Another thing I want to bring up is testing. If you guys remember earlier when I was attempting to test the N8N flow, all I did was I pinned an example, and then I could actually manually modify the content of that example here. And then all I needed to do was I just ran the subsequent modules, or subsequent nodes rather, one by one, right? And it always just used that same input. I can't overstate how valuable it is to have that ability in a no-code tool, because the alternative is basically make.com, where if I want to run something from left to right, I basically need to make an API call to my email server every single time I do that. So there's no caching of data. There's nothing that easy. If you wanted to build that in, you'd actually have to manually do that by using something like a set variable module, setting it to whatever you want. And then on all downstream modules, having to reference that set variable module for your testing. And then anytime that you wanted to switch from staging to production, basically, you'd have to switch back over and over and over and over again, which means you have to go through every module and then change the email body variable back to the email text variable over and over and over again. And that's really annoying. It's also annoying because they kind of charge you a little bit more for it. So not even close. N8N is just much better with testing. Authorizing and connecting, Make wins for sure. I know that I showed you some pretty simple connection flows here where all you need to do is log into your Gmail, but in reality, N8N's connection flows are substantially harder most of the time. If you wanted to connect, I don't know, like a Google Sheet or something. Actually, you know what? Now you could probably do one-click auth, right? Yeah, okay. I take that back. You can do one-click auth here. But previously, if you wanted to do, I don't know, something like a Google Drive, you would have to create a credential, and then you would have to go and use, you basically have to like do a whole API connection, which is obviously extraordinarily intimidating for new users. So like really, you're going to have to go into the, Google Cloud Console and get the OAuth redirect URL, the client ID, the client secret. And you have to read super annoying, but also very intimidating documentation on how to do this, which, honestly, you could screw up and it could take you forever and you could be totally dead-ended. Whereas if you wanted to do the same thing with make.com, you would just add a Google Drive module here. And the connection to this is literally just, again, sign in with Google. It's sort of a one-click sort of deal. So very straightforward. Make.com, even despite the fact that they have like 10 times the built-in modules, it's just much, much better there. So Make definitely wins on that respect. For webhooks and mail hooks, Make wins as well. It's extraordinarily simple, and this isn't going to make sense unless you have like a no-code background, but it is extraordinarily simple to set up a custom, basically, event handler in make.com. All you do is you click add, you make new webhook. Let's just do YouTube example. I've had to start writing YouTube example because I went through all of my connections a little while ago and there were like 8 million that were just ASDF. I'm just going to say YouTube example, N8N versus Make webhooks. They just give you an address, and you can just send a request to this address anytime you want, and then something will automatically populate here. It's crazy if you think about it. And N8N, they have an equivalent feature if you go down to webhook. But I find in general, it's just a lot clunkier and it's a lot more annoying to use. If you were to listen for the test event, I don't know. In my limited experience, admittedly, I might have less than 200 hours or something like that on N8N in total at this point. The N8N webhooks are substantially more annoying to deal with. If you do the wrong request type instead of a get, or you do a post or something like that, they won't just tell you that you did the wrong request type. You'll just be stuck here waiting. There's a difference between test URLs and then production URLs, which is important if you're like a computer programmer or something. But the vast majority of non-technical folks, they won't remember to change the test to the production likewise. And then they ask for some sort of like auth usually by default. So it's a lot more secure, don't get me wrong. But if you want to just get up and running with this stuff, Make is definitely superior. Another issue is there's no built-in mailhook feature. Make basically coined the term mailhook, but now it's like a very like a lot of people expect this. A mailhook is just like a webhook. It's just instead of a webhook, it's an email address. So if you send an email to this address, like if I go back here, and if I were to just make an email, I could actually like have a flow set up that, basically like does something every time you send an email to this address. Think of the possibilities and opportunities here. You could basically instantly create a system that you CC something and it does something else. It adds a record to click up, or if you BCC or something like that, maybe it automatically starts following a user on a social media platform. Like the abilities here for mail integrations particularly are limitless. So if that's something that you're looking to do a lot of, definitely look more towards Make. AI features, I hope that this is self-explanatory, but N8N wins hands down. I know I covered the text classifier here, but the biggest module and probably the most popular one is the AI agent module here. As I mentioned, the really cool part of the AI agent, if I just exit out of this and kind of scroll down, is it even has this inherent chat feature, which is crazy. But there's nothing like this in Make.com. Make's not even close. You basically have to rebuild the wheel every time you want to do something like this. So, when a chat message is received, and you could chat with the model right here, it will go and it will call a chat model of your choosing. So OpenAI chat model, I'm going to select my credentials. Sure, let's do GPT-4o Mini. Then it'll also talk to a memory store that you have, which stores 5 or however many messages you want from your past conversation history. And then depending on that, you can choose a tool that you want it to do, which is pretty crazy. So I don't know. This is the simplest API in the whole wide world. I don't know if I'm actually going to do a tool usage. I'm trying to like find a very simple example. Maybe we'll do the Gmail API, and then we're just going to read through. Let's not send. Let's get. Maybe get many. We're going to simplify them. And then now we're going to chat with our little AI agent. Hi, how's it going? All right, AI agent is already here and ready to help you. What can you do for me? It can retrieve information, do email management, task assistance, and general advice. Like, that's pretty crazy. Could you retrieve my most recent email from info@leftclick.ai? We're just going to send it a message, ask it to retrieve the most recent email from info@leftclick.ai. It's then going to call my little tool. And it's going to take a while for that tool to obviously consume and do whatever it is that it needs to do. But then it goes through and it finds the tool in my email inbox just using natural language. And as you can see, I set that up in like 3 seconds, right? So it includes a snippet, includes all the data and all that stuff. You can make this arbitrarily complicated. I added a single tool here. You could add 500. I mean, you probably shouldn't add 500, but what you can do is you can add 5, and then one of the other ones you can add is another AI agent, which filters some other stuff. Essentially what you're doing is you're making this big decision tree, which is pretty neat, and you can chain together however many of these things that you want. It does start to break down after a certain point, and I won't say that it's like super business capable at the moment, but it's very clear that this is going to be the future of the vast majority of businesses. They're just going to have AI agents that route decisions and do queries. So yeah, not even close. N8N wins hands down. If you're looking to get more involved in AI agents, and that's like kind of the next step you want to take, then N8N's the one for you. Sharing and collaborating functionality, N8N also wins on that front. If I just go over here, if I wanted to share this flow, which, is kind of two parts, so let me just delete this AI agent. Sorry, buddy, you're not taking my job just yet. We click share over here. Sorry, not share. Well, we can collaborate with other people in our workspace very easily with that button. But if we go over here and then we click download, you can basically very quickly and easily download like a blueprint file or a JSON, which is similar to what make.com allows you to do. And what this data is it's basically like a code representation of all of the modules in your flow, along with all the connections and like the positions on the page and all the test data and stuff like that, which is obviously pretty neat, right? The benefit to this, though, is if you think about it, there's also the ability to import from a URL, which is kind of new. So you can actually import a workflow from a URL. You can, remember how earlier we said that there were a bunch of templates? Well, this is what's happening under the background. You can actually just click any one of these workflows and instantly just import it to your a workspace. You can also copy the template to your clipboard, and I could just paste this in. And it'll literally just like paste in this huge Lego block-like thing. And as you can see, you can get arbitrarily big and complicated with this stuff. I mean, this flow could be, I don't know, it could start here or go all the way down here. There could be 8 million modules involved. Not that I recommend you build flows that have 8 million modules, but I think you guys see what I'm saying with this copy and paste stuff. Make.com's a lot more annoying, I find, with this. You have to use this little import blueprint thing, and then you have to choose a file on your computer. There's nowhere near as big of a template library available. Like, there are templates, don't get me wrong. I just find that the templates are nowhere near as nuanced or as valuable. And this is coming from somebody that like actually uses these to make real money. These are usually just 1 or 2 step flows, and like, yeah, they're cool and stuff, and that's nice, but nowhere near as detailed as like the thriving developer open source community that N8N has, unfortunately. So your ability to collaborate is definitely impacted. Hotkeys, N8N definitely crushes it with hotkeys, not just like the availability of the hotkeys, but also the fact that they like teach you everything. If you mouse over stuff, it'll just tell you what hotkey you need to click in order to have it happen. So top right hand corner here, I'm mousing over this plus button. It says, hey man, quit clicking this button. Next time, just press tab instead, right? Variety of other examples of this, but yeah, they lend themselves to this little text interface quite a bit, which I like. And there aren't very many hotkeys in make.com at all, if I'm being honest, aside from just like the built-in ones in your browser. Like, you can tab through fields for sure, but really, like, that's it. I could just tab through fields. Is there really nothing else? If I wanted to copy something, the copy, paste, cut. I mean, like, these are all things that are obviously native to my computer, not really built into make.com. And I consider it such a shame because I think make.com could be so much more easy to use with some hotkeys, but they are really just targeting that total noob demographic, I would say. Note-taking and documentation, N8N wins for sure. If I wanted to document a flow in make.com for this, I would have to click on this notes feature. I'd have to right-click on this, go add a note. I'd say, note about XYZ. Then click exit out of this. I'd right-click this, add a note about ABC. Not only is this just not very intuitive, like the only way to see my notes is I have to physically go down here to notes and then give it a click, and then and only then will I see it. Not only is this not very intuitive, it's very limited with like what you can do. I mean, sure, you could make this really long if you wanted to, I guess. But I don't know, there's no formatting. You can only see it if you click on the button. You have this little arrow. I guess what I'm trying to say is N8N just does a much, much better job with notes. You guys remember that template that I just copy and pasted a moment ago? If I copy this again, and go back here, like if I paste this puppy in, just look at the way that this is documented, right? You have a variety of different formatting options. Natively accepts Markdown, which is just a text formatting method. You can drag and drop these to be visible anywhere you want. There's so much information basically on everything that you can like document any flow that you possibly want. For you or somebody else in your team, for instance. So that makes it just a lot easier and clearer to use in general. So I hope I'm not convincing you to use, N8N over make.com necessarily. What I'm going to do next is just tell you guys what I would do if I were in your shoes. Sorry, one more thing. We have some financial comparisons to do. I spoke a little too early. Okay, let's do the financial comparisons, and then at the end, I'll talk about which platform I would use if I were in your shoes right now, and I were kind of at the start line of my business versus if I were sort of halfway through. So financial comparison-wise, now I think you know how each platform works realistically. Let's now turn to the major topic that is on most people's minds and is honestly the main reason why most people choose one platform or the other, the financials involved. So how much money could you realistically expect to spend on realistically expect to spend on each platform if you wanted to. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to break costs down below so you guys can make the best decision for you. To keep things relatively equal across each of these, I'm going to be using a hypothetical example where you just need to run the system that I built 2,500 times per month, or a little under 100 times per day. So 2,500 times per month, I don't know, it's like 80 times a day or something like that. I'm assuming that, you get 80 emails a day. That may seem a little crazy for you, but I guess if you think about it logically, if you're running like a big info ad email or a hello ad or something, 80 emails a day, while on the higher end of the number of emails you might receive, it's actually not that crazy to consider. So we're going to start by doing a financial breakdown of N8N, and then I'm going to do a financial breakdown of Make.com as well. If I start with the N8N financial breakdown, which apparently disappeared for some reason, let's exit out of this puppy and see. If I start with this N8N financial breakdown, basically the way that their pricing works is, and I've clicked monthly on all of these. You can also buy annual plans, and I think the pricing is a little bit different, but not by that much. N8N is absolutely 100% free if you self-host it. I'm going to cover that in a second, but I just want to make sure that everybody here knows that's like one of the main draws of the self-hosting feature. Now, I'm going to be comparing this on a cloud hosting to cloud hosting basis, just because it doesn't really make sense to compare apples to oranges. Let's compare oranges to oranges to start. If you were to compare oranges to oranges and then go cloud-based hosting for both N8N and Make.com, here's what it looks like. You will pay $24 a month for 2,500 workflow executions and 5 active workflows. What is a workflow execution? To be clear, a workflow execution is this. One run of this is a workflow execution. So that runs 80 times a day. You're consuming 80 workflow executions a day. You are allowed 5 active workflows. What is an active workflow? If we go back to personal here, I'm just going to save this flow and exit out and go back to the dashboard. 5 would be 5 systems that are clicked to active. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is all you would be able to do for $24, which, to be honest, pretty crappy. The fact that they limit the number of active workflows you have on the $24 a month plan, that's kind of crappy. So not very good there, because, I can think of a dozen scenarios where, well, scenarios is a funny word. I can think of a dozen instances where you could have, where you would need substantially more than 5 to do even like some of the more basic things in a business. So I really don't like how they limit the number of active workflows. It's probably like the shittiest part of their pricing model, to be honest. But obviously, the self-hosting comes in handy, and anytime you're over 5, that's typically what people do. So if we were to run a scenario 2,500 times, obviously this would be under the $24 a month plan because we have 1 active workflow. That's how much it would cost, 24 euros, I should say, per month. Now let's chat really quickly about the self-hosting. If you self-host an N8N workflow, you don't pay them a dime. Your only costs are the server that you are going to be using to host your N8N open source instance. That's it. So most of the time in practice, server costs, like at the beginning and low end of the range, might be $5 to $10 a month. The higher end of the range, you might be spending like 30, 40, $50 a month if you have like a pretty good server. If you want to spend like a couple $100 a month or whatever, you'll have like the best server ever, but you probably don't really need to unless you're doing something mega enterprise. So what that means is, you can kind of get away with $5 a month. And theoretically, on that $5 a month, you could like probably scale to over 100,000 workflow executions. So like that's 40 times what you're getting for 24 euro a month, There are so many options. Like there's Render, that's one service, DigitalOcean, Easy Panel. I could throw out like 500 here. And I know a lot of people have, like a lot of these companies have actually reached out to me being like, hey, Nick, can you do a video on self-hosting N8N using our platform because it's blowing up right now? I never have. But when I do end up making that video, I'm just going to pick whatever one is the best, not necessarily whichever one sponsors me. But yeah, you can get, servers and all these for like $5 to $10 a month-ish, and then you could run 100,000 workflow executions. And since a workflow execution in N8N is very different from an operation consumption in Make, like this is pretty huge, right? If the average Make scenario has 10 operations or 10 modules and it takes 10 operations every run, like theoretically, this is like 1 million operations a month for like $5 a month. So that's what's really attractive to a lot of people that do Make.com. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are switching over to N8N. Now, in terms of scaling, they're not captured in our example. The key point in N8N is how affordably it scales. Make.com doesn't really scale very affordably. A single scenario can consume many ops, usually between 5 to 25, I want to say. N8N will only ever count a single workflow on their cloud offering. Additionally, if you're doing self-hosted, you can run an infinite number of workflows for the same or slightly elevated cost per month, which is nothing. So that's pretty cool. Obviously, N8N has quite a lot of big dick energy there. If you could just self-host your Make thing and just never have to pay them, how great would that be, right? Moving on, let's do a Make.com financial breakdown. So as you see here, there are a variety of plans on the monthly side of things. There's a free plan, there's a core plan, a pro plan, teams plan, enterprise plan. I should note that you technically don't have like a free plan here for the cloud hosting. It's just the self-hosting. So technically like Make.com is more accessible at the lower levels. You can get started for free, right? You don't actually have to pay a dime, nor do you have to know any computer programming or anything. You can actually get up and running for $0. But generally, if you want to do anything meaningful in a business, you're going to need core or up. The good news is core starts at just $10.59, so 10,000 ops a month. Pretty simple. When I wrote this, I thought that our scenario would include 5 modules. I believe it only ended up including 4, right? Yeah, it only ended up including 4. So this is actually even less than this. So the logic that I did here with 5 was I said, if we run this 2,500 times a month, we have 5 modules which get executed. 5 times 2,500 is 12,500. 12,500 would be over the limit of most built-in $10,000 in ops a month plans, like Core for $10.59 or Pro for $18.82, or Teams for $34.12. So you'd have to upgrade. That would then cost $18.82 per month on this plan on 20,000 instead. But because we're doing this for just 4 times 2,500, technically this fits under the core plan for $10.59 a month, which makes Make a lot more cost-effective than N8N's cloud-hosted offer for this example. This does make it less cost-effective than their self-hosted offer still in most cases, because you can usually get a server for less than this, and that server would be able to run like 100 times this, right? Now, the issue with Make.com, I would say, pricing-wise, is it just scales really fast. Most scenarios are going to include a ton more modules than our little example did with 5. Or 4, I should say. And a lot of the time there'll be some sort of looping functionality where you might run the scenario once, but you have 50 bundles. So 50 times 5 or 4 is instantly 200. And if you run that like more than a few times a day, you basically are like using your entire month's operation budget with just one scenario. So that kind of sucks. Yeah, I'm not going to graph it for you guys, but essentially it's like more affordable at the beginning and then it like spikes way up. And what's interesting, depending on how long you guys have been in the no-code business for, is this is basically the comparison between Zapier and Make.com a few years ago. Zapier was kind of the one that was like, scaled way the hell up. And if you were like a pro and you wanted to like get better at this stuff, you'd move over to Make. But now that same determination is kind of being made between Make and N8N. And it makes sense if you think about it, because the market itself in no code is getting more sophisticated. Like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, I mean, how many people were out there developing no code stuff? Fewer, right? But over the course of the last 5 years, like some of those people have become really good, and the median ground of the market has become reasonably good. So if you're really good or reasonably good, it makes sense that you'd start going towards more developer-friendly applications, right? That's just logical. Anyway, which one should you choose? Drum roll, please. This is probably what most people here were waiting for. Nick, what would you choose if you were in my shoes? Let me tell you. It depends. I'd pick one or the other depending on circumstance. So as I mentioned before, almost all no-code platforms are capable of the same things. If you can do something in Make, you can absolutely do it in N8N. It's not just a matter of, is this possible? It's a matter of how many steps would be required in order for me to do this? How difficult would this be? Right? So I really want to like prove that to you guys, that you can do anything in either one. And that's why I built that same system in both. And we had relatively different approaches for them. Now, a simple answer to the question is Make is going to be easier for simpler things. N8N is going to be easier for more complex and operationally intensive, more expensive things. So if you find yourself doing easier things more often, and if you're not very technically competent, it's easier for simple applications. N8N is going to be better for you if you're operationally intensive, spending a lot of money on make ops and that sort of stuff. So let me give you guys some context and then tell you exactly what I would do if I were starting. N8N clearly markets itself as for developers by developers. It's growing very quickly, especially in the last few months. It makes sense because, as I've mentioned here, it's a new concept. So as time passed, the market has gotten more skilled. So users want better tools, right? Now, Make.com markets itself as for everybody, despite not being accessible or open source, but it is a much simpler tool to get up and running with, and beginners often find it more intuitive. As you get more experience with programming, though, its built-in features will get limiting, and then costs will scale reasonably quickly. So if I were starting over again, like if Nick, day one, man, like what would you pick today, 2025, just heading out into the automation world, whether I wanted to build something for myself or, for my clients or whatever, what would you do? I would go with Make.com. The reason why is because the barrier to entry for me to build something that produces actual tangible business value, like today, that drives an ROI for my own company or the companies that I work with that I'm selling services to, is lower. It's simpler. It's easier to get up and running with. That's all I care about. All I care about, my whole paradigm, if you guys watch the rest of my content, get up and running quickly, say yes to everything, figure it out later, right? So it'd be very easy for me to learn and then start seeing a payoff. And that payoff would feed back into my motivation to learn, which would ultimately cut my learning curve, right? What I would do after that is, over the course of months or years, naturally I'm going to get better at this stuff, because you get better at stuff that you do more often. So as my skills and needs develop, I would start looking into N8N as a natural progression of my journey. It is very clear that N8N is where the future of all of this stuff is going. N8N is devouring market share, and it's growing very quickly. And their AI agent functionality in particular is just going to keep blowing the hell up over the course of the next few years. So I definitely start doing that. And the benefit there is, as you could see, most of the concepts that underlie these different terms, they're really the same, right? Like a node is a module. Nodes and modules both have fields that you drag and drop different, little colored things to. There's testing involved in flows and stuff, right? Like if you start with make.com, it'll probably take you, and you get to a sufficient level, it'll probably take you 20% of the time it otherwise would have taken you had you just started with N8N off the bat. So your total time investment is not, I have to learn a whole nother thing from scratch, so it's 2 times as much. No, it's really like 1.2 times as much. It's 1.2 times as much, and then you get to deliver value very quickly for your clients and for your own businesses. You keep motivated because it's a simple platform. And then you also, as your skills naturally develop, get to pick up the harder and harder shit, continue challenging yourself and growing. So that is what I would do if I were starting over again. TLDR, I'd go with Make to begin with, and then eventually I'd move over to N8N. Okay. Thank you for watching this guide. That takes us to the end of the walkthrough. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I had a lot of fun putting all this stuff together, obviously. If you guys like the content that I put out, I run 2 programs that teach people how to build automation companies, scale their automation agencies, and essentially build lifestyles that are on the upper echelon of what most people think is possible. The first is called Maker School. It's a simple daily accountability program. If I can open the tab, it's a simple daily accountability program run by me, where you essentially have a list of tasks that you do every single day. And those tasks are primarily lead generation oriented. They revolve around a few tried and true dedicated lead gen channels that have worked for me and for almost 1,000 other people at the time of this recording. And I coach you through it. There are tons of videos, little 3-4 minute snippets here or there. I think in total it's over 200 now. I give you templates. I walk you through some underground methods I use to find high paying qualified automation leads. And then you also get 1 monthly group call with me where you can literally ask me whatever you want. I stay on for like 2 hours once a month, 2.5 hours sometimes, depends on how badly I need to pee. And if you guys want to hear me answer all of your questions, that's kind of where you do it. I also run a community called makemoneywithmake.com. Now, as I mentioned here, N8N is taking the lion's share of new automation interests, and their AI agent stuff is picking up. So I may change the name depending on when you're watching this to something that just has more to do with general automation than specifically make.com. But essentially, this is the next step after Maker School. After you get those first few customers, after you get the ball rolling, what you do is you get into this program, makemoneywithmake.com, where I'm still coaching you, but I'm coaching you at a higher level. I'm also involving you more often in consultations. So instead of it being once a month, it's once a week. And then I have courses and programs therein that are more to do with scaling a business rather than necessarily just getting up and running. So I'm going to leave links for both of those in the description. I don't want to pitch, I want to keep the value of my content at 99% me giving stuff to you, 1% me talking about it. But given the fact that this video is probably over 3 hours by this point, I think that's probably on brand for me. If anybody has any questions about this, let me know. If you guys want a video about something that maybe I didn't cover here, then please shout. And if you guys are a fan of N8N, you guys want to learn more about the platform, I'm going to be doing a big video series just over the course of the next few weeks, where I do things very similar to what I did for make.com. I'm going to show you how to make actual revenue with this platform. I'm going to show you how to build systems that don't just look good, but they actually do good. Really just pull the wool out from over your eyes. Thank you again for your time. Looking forward to the next one. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.